So,
Hello.
here's what I wanted to ask you about and kind of understand a little bit better. And it's something that you've ranted about before, so I know you have feelings about the subject.
Shit.
Specifically, it's about what you've ranted about is the Iron Fist character, and about how you want to see it in Asian Iron Fist. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, Asian American specifically, but yeah.
Okay, so specifically Asian American.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I want to talk about, and it's kind of, from my understanding from reading about, and I'm not a comic book person, so you can absolutely feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong on this, but the character in the comics is white, correct?
Yeah.
Or am I wrong? Okay.
No. You are correct. I'm not a huge reader of the thing either, so
Okay.
but yeah.
So here's kind of the basis of things, and it's not just applied to this, it's applied to a lot of things. Where does it become kind of disrespectful to the original source material to change something about the character specifically? And this came up also with when Idris Elba was announced, well, was talked about as being James Bond, and how basically the books and the original source material, James Bond is very, very white.
Hmm.
And not even just that, but like any character, when you change a really big aspect of that character, whether it's a defining trait or not, where does it kind of become, well, you should really create an original character based on what you want instead of trying to change this character?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there, and I think that nobody who advocates for race bending Iron Fist, thinks that that's a small change, right? Kind of put that out there first. I think one thing also to address is the language that's used around this kind of thing. Like, you brought up the word disrespect, and I understand that. For instance, it would be disrespectful if they cast Doctor Strange as a white guy, even though he is originally. Oh,
Ooh.
my sound get all weird. I don't know
Yeah.
what the that is. That just happens. We're just gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But it threw me off. Yeah, casting a white guy to play Doctor Strange, even though he was originally Chinese in the comic, that kind of thing is pretty disrespectful. So you kind of have to take the context of the outside world. Like I said, there are many points about this, and so maybe let me see if I can kind of handle one at a time. I recently complained about the changing of the Ultron origin story for the second Avengers movie, because I really like Ultron's original origin. Do you know anything about that?
I know.
Okay, so initially, Hank Pym, who's played by Michael Douglas in the MCU, he was the original Ant-Man. He was an original Avenger. He was the pacifist Avenger. He was the Avenger who was like, we're going to take all these villains and put them in jail. A lot like the current Daredevil in the Netflix series. And so a lot of what Pym did was build technology to capture these criminals and keep them in some kind of super jail rather than kill them or whatever. And so he created these automated robots. I think they were all called Ultrons, and they were basically like prison guards and stuff. And the directive they were given was basically peace on Earth, which is what Pym was he was basically a hippie.
Yeah.
So Ultron, the one that became the bad guy in the movie, he took the idea of peace on Earth to an extreme. He looked at all the available data and said, well, anytime there's war or horrific violence or dead civilians, the Avengers seem to be there. So job number one in Peace on Earth is to take out the Avengers. And that's why he became this supervillain against the Avengers. But he's kind of, misguided, but he kind of gets it, right? Like he's performing his programming better than Pym thought he would. Anyway, um, I don't remember how much of that was in the movie. Do you?
Nah, the movie kind of. I don't know. I need to watch it again. I didn't.
I think it hinted at that stuff, but I don't think it kind of, and this caused this huge rift with Pym, and he broke away from the Avengers and all this stuff, and it's just a really cool origin story. Anyway, point being that when you use the word disrespect about race bending, that that word would never get used when talking about changing Ultron's origin story, right? So there's definitely that baggage to unpack. Is um, that, and also what exactly is disrespectful about taking a white character and making that character black or Asian? Um, Not to, like, I know what you were getting at, but
Disrespectful is probably not the right word.
that's
I
pretty
think that's what you're
racist.
kind of.
Well, I'm saying
Well,
it's
it
a step up.
is.
It's a step up in society to change somebody from black to white. Is how society sees it, right? Like it's a step up. It would be quote unquote respectful. Ayn Rand was very famous for wanting to be called he because she believed that men were superior, and so being called a man or being taken as a man was a step up from being a woman, and so that's kind of society's problem. She was an idiot, so she didn't quite understand that, but. Um, yeah, what,
We'll see.
huh?
That's kind of what I'm getting at with the line because disrespectful the is not the right word for it.
Mm,
I'm trying to search for the word. I really can't find a word that accurately describes what I'm trying to express because it's hard. Because I mean, what I mean is, if you as an artist, as a creator, create something and then somebody else takes it majorly, not just like fan art or something like that, but like takes it and then completely essentially changes things about it,
hmm
it's not your original intention. And even if it doesn't change the character, that's what I'm saying. Disrespectful is not exactly the right word. And also the complications come with what you're describing as far as if they changed it from Asian to white, for instance, that would be seen as a step up. Or if they changed it from a woman character to a man character, if it was first Supergirl and then Superman came out, Superman would be seen as the superior character just because of that reason.
hmm
And so I get that, and I get things like that, but it's just at the same time, if the character was created a certain way, doesn't the artist have, or the creator have, some sort of control over that?
Yeah, I think in a lot of circumstances that might be the case. I think that you might have a weak example because of the fact that translating the Marvel properties from their original, 1960s, 1970s origins, translating them to the current time and in some cases into the future is just what they're doing. Um, so Marvel as a company, that's what they're doing with everything. You hear about how Guardians of the Galaxy bears no resemblance to what the original Guardians of the Galaxy comic book was.
Yeah.
Captain America Winter Soldier, which is a lot of people's favorite Marvel MCU movie at this point, that was packed with 70s paranoia, which is some time after the original Captain America was created, right? So these comic books as intellectual property, as artistic property, I think are constantly undergoing change, and that's why that they've been popular for as long as they have been. So I think, if you might have a case if you're talking about Da Vinci and Mona Lisa or something like that, something that was meant to be static, but from everything that we're seeing about the trajectory of Marvel properties going to the screen in this specific current time, the motivation has changed, right? Same thing with the X-Men. You know, they became popular again in the 90s because of a lot of changes. So yeah, I think specific to the medium of comic books, I personally don't see it as a disrespectful thing because I think kind of like the Constitution, they're supposed to be living documents and they're always supposed to change. And that like the nature of comic books is so much different from the nature of a lot of other art in the sense that like different artists and writers come on board all the time. Like the people who created these characters in a lot of cases are deceased, and that's different from something like Harry Potter, for instance, right? So yeah, I think that's important to note about comic books as a specific thing. So in other words, like I don't care. I don't care about the respect, like the respect or disrespect. Like for instance, if someone took a podcast episode of mine and re-edited it to make it seem like I was saying something completely different than I actually was, then yeah, that they're like I have a problem with that. But that's because what I say on my show is very specific, and it's also my voice specifically, right? Like these comics are. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but is it disrespectful that in the Looney Tunes cartoons, Chinese people are no longer portrayed as buck-toothed Chinaman hat wearing racist caricatures because that's how they originally appeared. You know what I mean?
True.
So yeah, I hope this is making sense about the.
Yeah.
It's a living art form, I think, is what
Okay,
I'm saying.
and that's where I have conflict because I understand that there's I understand that part, but then I understand also the argument of kind of if it's a character somebody created and it was originally created this way, we should keep going that way.
But that's not happening
That's
with any MCU characters.
well, I mean that's exactly why I'm kind of throwing these questions at you because
Yeah.
I don't have that perspective, and it's
Well,
hard
but
for me to kind of
yeah. What do you think about let's see. Um well, Hawkeye is what is he? He's deaf
yeah.
in the comics and he's not that in the movies. Is that more or less okay than anything else or, you know?
Well, yeah, that too. That's what I mean. Like, if it was the other way around, I mean, you're taking somebody who's deaf and has disabilities and stuff, and then completely erasing that from that character in the movies.
Yeah.
To me, that is a little bit kind of untrue, or I guess again, disrespectful is not the right word. So I'm
Right.
looking for something else, but
No, sure. I mean, like, do you what it sounds like you're very sympathetic for the original creators of these properties.
sometimes yeah, like that's kind of where the conflict is because sometimes, and I can understand some of the properties are created based on racism, whether it or sexism or whatever, whether it's intentional or not, just a product of the culture at the time. Like for instance, I saw something the other day about how if Superman was actually written semi-realistically as far as being powered by the sun, he would essentially be black, and that's never
That's
something
true.
that would have happened when he was created.
Yeah.
And that's like I said, I don't think they intentionally said we can't make a black Superman. Your Superman has to be white. I think it was a product of we essentially racist culture of white people are portrayed as being gods and something like that, and yeah, I've lost my train of thought here.
But do you like is it somewhat persuasive to you to think about comic books as a living medium?
Yeah, I totally, and that's the other thing. I get it because like some characters and things I've heard, and I feel like yeah, that would be awesome to see a different take on it. Like for instance, when I brought up James Bond, I was all for Idris Elba playing James Bond, mostly because I love Idris Elba, but also that would be kind of a cool take to see on it.
Yeah.
And I think that would be kind of cool to actually see that. but then like other characters I think about, and then I kind of think, well, I wouldn't want to see that. I don't think that this is a good idea to change this of this character. Like for instance, you saw the article about who would be the best female Han Solo, right?
Yeah, yeah. From our friends at audienceseverywhere.net.
Audiences everywhere, go check them
We
out.
Talk Movies. I think that
Yes.
was written by. I'm probably going to get it wrong. Was it Richard Newby? I can't remember.
Yeah,
who
I think
wrote it.
I think he was the one that did that.
Okay.
And to me, it's one of the things where I'm full support of that as like a side movie. I would love to see that, honestly, a gender bended Han Solo. But if they suddenly made Episode 8 and Han Solo was a woman, I would have really big issues with that. Or for instance, when Fantastic Four, how Johnny Storm is black in the played by Michael Jordan in that movie. I was all kind of for that. Versus if they had I think if they had made, I don't know, like it's kind of weird for me. Like there are some instances where I'm totally on board for changing things, but then there's some where I think it should be kept as it was originally written. So. And then the other thing I kind of want to point out, and this is something it gets thrown at, and a lot of times it gets thrown at, I don't want to say not sarcastically, but kind of just condescendingly. Wouldn't it be better to have, for instance, instead of having an Asian American Iron Fist, wouldn't it be better to have a totally brand new character?
I guess. I mean, there are reasons behind wanting an Asian American Iron Fist. So to say, hey, let's just do a brand new character that kind of dismisses or doesn't hear the reasons why an Asian American Iron Fist would make more sense than a white Iron Fist at this particular stage in pop culture history. So I think that like there's a little bit of dismissiveness in that. There are new characters, quote unquote, like you have Asian versions of other characters, right? Like the Asian Hulk, Amadeus Cho. He's not really his own creation. He's just an Asian version of another character. Same thing with Miles Morales for Spider-Man. Same thing with his upcoming Chinese Superman, who for some reason has a Japanese first name, even though he's written by a Chinese guy. I don't understand it. Like so there is that. It does kind of there's a lot of issues here, basically. Like, and I think we need to examine them one by one and be very focused on them, or else it's very easy to just be like, well, wouldn't it be better if blah blah blah, right? Like, one of the arguments for the Asian American Iron Fist, and we can kind of like focus in on this one topic, is that if the MCU at this point had been neutral to Asians and Asian Americans, then I think that would be one thing. But it's been kind of actively, aggressively either very bad to its Asian characters or completely invisibilizing Asian people altogether. On the big screen, there's no cause to have Asian people on the screen for some reason, right? Like, they're in New York City, which is very diverse, and my door's open. I closed it, but now it's open. Kind of scared. But they haven't found a reason to even pretend that Asian people exist on the big screen. And then, as I've been talking about lately with Daredevil, it's outright actively terrible, right? Daredevil will not kill anybody unless it's an Asian guy. Like, and he pretends throughout all of season 2 that he has not ever killed somebody. But when he sees Nobu for the first time, he's like, "You're alive? I saw you die." So, I mean, that's a huge oversight in the writing, right? And it speaks to how cavalier the MCU has been towards representation. So Asian American Iron Asian American Iron Fist in that sense is a corrective, is a hey, the things have dropped below the acceptable water level, so let's pour some more water in the bucket and get it back up to where it needs to be. I think you would have seen less calls or fewer calls for Asian American Iron Fist if Marvel had even tried to pretend that they were willing to represent Asians in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. I mean,
Mm.
like I said, most of the reason I argue and I phrase this as "let's fight about it" is not so much that I have strong convictions about these things. It's more just like I said, I want to hear different
Yeah.
opinion things
Well,
because
I'm not trying to make you feel bad.
oh
I'm
no,
just trying to answer your questions
yeah, no,
as directly as possible.
you're doing a good job with it. That's because I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
and also kind of helps me understand why I feel these things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
as far as putting a different way to look at it, because like I said, that last one is always thrown in as more of a condescending way, as far as oh, if you want things done, why don't you just do it yourself then? Oh, why don't you just do this? And that's not how I mean it, but like I kind of also get that as a point, as far as if you haven't been represented in this universe at all, wouldn't you rather have a character that was done specifically and written specifically and created just for this reason, without any history of what it was in the past? And I think you kind of did a good job of explaining why that line of thinking is kind of dismissive of reasons as far as why there should be
Right.
an
The fact that
existing
it's a
character
corrective
change.
is people
Yeah,
don't really understand that. But also, to your point, we had one. His name was Doctor Strange. So
well, that's a Chinese guy who's playing it right now, right? He's a
yeah,
Chinese, and he's also he's definitely Asian, right?
yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch that's like the John Smith of Chinese names. So that's good.
Right.
Uh, like, yeah, we had one. We had one. You took it.
See that also we took. Sorry, I know we did. I apologize. But that also bothers me. Like when something like that happens, when would that be considered whitewashing? Not. Is
There's
that the
okay.
right
So
word?
there's different reasons here. And the reasons are what uh, people like me, people who are kind of race activists, are. The reasons are important in these circumstances. It's Hollywood and Marvel assume that nobody is going to see a Doctor Strange movie that doesn't star someone who's already famous. Hollywood has not made any Asian Americans famous. Therefore, it's extremely natural that when you're casting Doctor Strange, you're gonna use a guy not only who is extremely white, but someone who has actually played a character, like he's already race bent another character into being a white guy. In the character of Khan, who was originally played by Ricardo Montalban in Star Trek. So that's the motivation behind that. The motivation behind race bending Iron Fist, on the other hand, is, as I mentioned before, it's a corrective, but it's also that if Iron Fist was created in this day and age, people would more easily recognize the Orientalist tropes that he was based upon. And in all reality, and I guess you can say this about any character, but in all reality, he should have been Asian American to begin with, right? Based on what they were trying to do with him. And the other thing about kind of respecting the creator is that we don't know if the creator of Iron Fist initially went in there and pitched an Asian American guy, right? And someone might have said to him, "Hey, we can't do that. We can have white protagonists, we can have black ones, but the Asians, I don't know about that." In the same way that Doctor Strange slowly morphed from being a Chinese guy to a white guy. So the intentions behind race bending really, really matter, I think, in this context, because again, I've said this a billion times, but the major racial force preventing, or the major racial force that the black community is tackling is anti-blackness, and for Asian Americans, the major force is erasure, and that's kind of what you're seeing happen with Doctor Strange. I think it's a very straightforward example. He's literally his Chinese background is literally erased over time. With Asian American Iron Fist, or Iron Fist as a character, I think it's a more subtle kind of erasure because what it is, because what happens is you have a white guy go into an Asian country, take all of the Asian culture, and then bring it back to America in the form of a white person, and that disallows for the idea that Asians have their own experience and that Asian Americans have their own experience. So, yeah, I think that's just to answer your question about why one situation is different from another. I think they are like without going into like full social justice warrior mode. Like, I do think it's on. I do think there's honestly a huge difference, and not to mention the kind of infuriating fact that questions like this get asked when an Asian American Iron Fist is proposed, but they never get asked when Cumberbatch is cast to play Doctor Strange. Like nobody, these are supposedly race neutral questions. Like, I'm not against Asian Americans. I just wonder if it's disrespectful to the creator. Well, why not ask that for the Doctor Strange thing? Like, why doesn't that come to mind? Have we not been disrespectful to that creator for decades, and with the casting of Cumberbatch?
No,
It's
I agree with
interesting
that.
to say the least. It's very, very interesting that these questions only come up when race bending a character out of whiteness and not into whiteness.
Well, like I said, that's what I was saying. The other original question: would you rather have an original character? That's always presented in a way of trying to kind of keep people in line, I guess. Like I said, it's kind of condescending the way it's phrased. And I think that's when you're talking about why are these questions only asked when it's, changing from a white person to non-white. And I think that's a good point as far as, like, it is. Nobody cares if nobody would care. Well, nobody cared about Benedict Cumberbatch, whatever. And I don't think it's just because of his popularity, which, I mean, honestly, he's a decent actor. I've enjoyed things that he's been in, but it's also so for instance, the a little bit off topic, but Black Panther movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it was announced that they were looking, or that it was going to be a black director, and people were saying it should be a black director, and people were saying, well, why are you looking at race? Shouldn't it be? It kind of brings into the best man for the job kind of thing. Who's going to sell our movies? Who's going to do this? And let me ask you a question about how you feel about something.
Mm.
And I apologize if I'm being insensitive with this, but
Yeah.
do you think we live in a world right now where a Asian or Asian American lead for that movie, Doctor Strange, would sell, even if not as much as Benedict Cumberbatch? Do you think it would actually be popular enough where it would be a good financial decision?
I do. There's evidence to support that diverse casts make more money. I can't quote you anything off the top of my head, but it just seems like a really common thing lately for these articles to be written about how well diverse casts do. One of the reasons why I direct my rage at Marvel, besides the fact that I like the characters and I'm a fan of the characters and everything, is because they have more carte blanche right now with what they do than any company I've seen since I've been alive as far as entertainment. I believe if they cast, let's say Daniel Day Kim, I think he actually kind of looks like Doctor Strange. If they cast him, I don't think there would I don't think there would be any noticeable difference, honestly, in the box office, because Doctor Strange is part of the MCU. He is hopefully introducing this new element of magic, which they've really intentionally tried to stay away from in the rest of the MCU so far. So it's bringing a new aspect to it. But like, a lot of people saw Thor: The Dark World, and that movie was fucking boring. And I don't think a lot of people saw Thor because they were like, "Oh, we got black movies all up in the theaters. We got to go make sure we see the Aryan guy." Like, I don't think that was the case. I think the reason they went to see Thor was because they were like, "All right, well, superhero movies are fun. Marvel's been doing a good job, and these solo movies are going to bridge between the first and second Avengers movies, and so I need to be in the loop." And I think they would do the exact same thing for Doctor Strange, regardless of who is cast as the main character.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I just wanted to hear your kind of thoughts on that.
And that's why it's so infuriating. It's because they could have done
They
it.
could have done it.
They're bulletproof.
That's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
that's why that casting choice like would bother me, because it does bother me, because it's like I said. I mean, I don't have to look at a position from race because I'm not obviously Asian or anything.
Well, but you
so,
can. You're allowed to have thoughts.
yeah,
Uh,
but I mean, I generally don't, and that's not a purposeful thing. It's kind of just, that's not to say that I'm not saying the bullshit line of I don't see color. What
mhm.
I'm saying is when I look at things, I kind of have, I don't have to be offended by things or anything. And I'm not saying that as in, oh God, I'm not saying that as in, oh, you're offended by that.
Right. No, no, I get you. But you can be. I mean,
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm offended by that choice because they could have done that. They so easily could have made Doctor Strange an Asian actor, and there's so many to choose from, whether known or unknown or whatever, that probably would have done a fantastic job with the character.
yeah,
That why did they
there's
have
3 billion of us, so that
Well, yeah, I mean,
or something like that.
got to be a few even there. But like, I just mean, it could have been done, and that's what infuriates me about that casting choice. Or when other things like that have happened, it's just like there's no reason for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, racism is really the only reason
yeah,
for it.
it's because they expect the middle America and all the rest of the world, or the rest of the United States, to be so against an Asian American character or actor that
Well, maybe it's that, but maybe it just never crossed their mind even. Like that's a pervasive form of racism in Hollywood as well, where it's like
yeah,
it's not they're not actively they're not like burning down black churches in Hollywood. What they're doing is they're opening up their casting rooms and having an idea in their mind of what their ideal actor or actress looks like, and what they don't realize is that look in their head is white.
yeah. No, I definitely could see that. But see what's weird about me to that is when you have a specifically Asian character, and then your character in your mind, like that's going back to the best man for the job. I don't see race. That whole thing. Sometimes you kind of have to like that's the thing. Like a non-Asian Doctor Strange is kind of weird to me, and
Hmm.
yeah, I would say that I would go as far as to say that is kind of racist.
Yeah,
You know,
it is. You don't have
like
to say kind of.
okay, it is racist. I mean,
It's racist.
when you go into the casting call, I don't think that you could argue that it's racism or reverse racism or whatever buzzwords people love. If you had a casting call for Asian Americans looking for a Doctor Strange,
Hmm.
it's kind of, even if you, I guess to say like, not looking for white people is one thing, but to say you're specifically looking for somebody who's Asian, I think there's nothing wrong with that, because think about it, like you're putting it there. I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but like when they're looking for any actor, any movie, anything, they're looking for somebody who's white.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So that
Right,
automatically,
unconsciously. Yeah, yeah.
not even, well, sometimes it is,
Right.
whether it is or not.
Sure. Sure.
Just because they don't write that on a casting call, people get all up in arms when they are put on it in a casting call. Only looking for black actors, only looking for Asian actors, but like every other casting call might as well have only looking for white.
Hmm. Yeah, I think to bring it back to something we were talking about earlier, correctives are necessary, and to not realize that is to just deny the world that we live in. And so, you know, these stupid ass meninists are like, oh, you want female superiority, not equality. And the problem is they're coming from a place where they think that everybody is already treated equally, and
Yeah.
that's just not the case. And so sometimes, like, here's the thing: if you spend hundreds and hundreds of years putting another group down, when they start coming up even a little bit, it's gonna look like unfairness to you, right?
You're losing your privilege. It's not.
Right. Well, but it's like these people have the idea that everything's equal now, and so that any shifts in any direction would be making things unequal, and that's completely not true at this point. So, in order for us to, well, let me put it this way too: most people in their sitting in their living rooms, like, they're not going to riot anymore if they see a realistic black family or a realistic Asian American family. There was a time when they would have, and there are still executives that are alive who remember those times, and executives who are alive when they were spraying down black protesters with fire hoses. And it's hard not to absorb that kind of thing and think of people of other races as essentially inhuman. Especially if you're rich. If you're rich, you can afford to live where your other white people live, right? So if you're a rich old guy and you're running, or you have some kind of input into what media gets released, you have these built-in biases, and you're not willing to take the chance that something's going to go over well. But I don't, even middle America, even the quote unquote flyover states that people kind of put down, I don't see them rioting if things become more diverse. Like, I think that the executives are giving the American people less credit than they actually deserve. Like we said earlier, I don't think anybody would have a problem with an Asian Doctor Strange. I mean, you're always going to have like these stupid, ignorant racists making jokes about Doctor Strange eating dogs or whatever, but that doesn't mean that the majority of people out there are just going to see it and not even really care. Really, what makes them care is all this pushback from guys like Ike Perlmutter sending emails talking about how female-led superhero movies never do well. Like, that stuff influences how open or closed-minded people are more than what movies you release, because people are like, as long as people get their entertainment and they get their gigantic crossover Marvel worlds, they're gonna be fine.